Welcome to the Communication Diva Podcast, episode 118. On this episode of the podcast, Jenn speaks with Sandra Fischer about relationships in the workplace. Ms. Fischer has a diverse background, including being the creator of a card game for couples and singles seeking lasting relationships called Relationship Reveal. Inspired by her conversation with Jenn on workplace relationships, Ms. Fischer will soon start on her next project, a game of strategy, chance, risk, a big payoff for the winner, and a potentially gruesome fate for the loser. Office Refrigerator Reveal.
Hey, this is Jenn, and welcome to the Communication Diva Podcast, the show that helps you to get the job, to love your work, and to advance your career. It is absolutely pouring rain here, and the conversation that I had in my half of it, you can hear it in the background, and the Skype call does not pick it up, so I'm sorry about the sound here. There's not a lot I can do to eliminate it, but you will hear some of the sound of the rain in the background in this recording. I'm speaking today to Sandra Fischer, who is a writer and a consultant and the creator of the game Relationship Reveal. And in our conversation, we talk about workplace, collegial relationships, and romantic relationships. And so I'm going to turn you over right now to my conversation that happened earlier today. So Sandra, welcome and thanks for being with the Communication Diva audience.
Well, thank you very much for having me today. I'm pleased to be here.
Well, I'd love to have you start off with telling us a little bit about your story. What brought you to this place where you're an author and a consultant and you created a game? How did you get to this place?
Well, I've always been, my whole life, been really passionate about people and how they interact. And I think even as a kid, I was a big study of, what made people successful in their communications. And as I grew up, that maintained itself as a passion, and I got really interested in crossing cultures and understanding how to communicate across those lines, and really looked for opportunities in my corporate environment to explore how to make people in teams, how to make individuals the best that they could possibly be. And so in all of my various corporate work, that's kind of been a key focus of mine, whether it's working in a team context, individual development. And so I was also passionate about finding great tools for doing that. And I did a lot of work in my various jobs using competencies. And interestingly enough, I was sitting in a hot tub with a girlfriend of mine, and we were just talking about relationships and how difficult it was sometimes with people in their personal relationships to be able to communicate what it was they wanted, what they needed, what they were passionate about, and to really be able to ask for getting their needs met. And so we started cross-referencing, some of the tools that we used in the corporate world. And I said, well, wouldn't it be great if we took this competency model and applied it to, more romantic relationships? So, and that was about 8 years ago, and the idea percolated, and then Relationship Reveal was born, and I came up with a tool based on a competency model that came from the corporate world and turned it into something that helps more intimate partnerships create more effective communications for themselves. So it's been a really interesting road. And now I'm so excited because they're crossing over quite a bit. The corporate work that I did with people and this relationship, more intimate partnership work is, you wouldn't expect it to, but it actually is crisscrossing. And I'm loving being able to pull all of that together.
It sounds like you're living your passion here.
I am. It was, and it was great because I was recently on a Northwest morning show, actually not too long ago. And one of the things that came up in the audience conversation afterwards was they were all asking for a relationship reveal to be created for the workplace, because I think people struggle so much in their relationships in the workplace, and how to make those the most effective that they can be. We spend a lot of time with people at work, so it makes sense that we want those relationships to be super successful.
Absolutely. Well, it's there's lots going on in my mind right now that I want to ask you about. But our topic today is about exactly that, relationships in the workplace, whether they are relationships with your colleagues or with your coworkers, your supervisor, the people that you are supervising, and also I want to talk a little bit about romantic relationships in the workplace. So where do we start? What you said that they can be stressful. Regular relationships in the workplace can be stressful. What can we begin with there?
Well, I think we all come to our lot. We bring to every relationship all of our whole life, and all of our experiences, all of our perceptions. And so when we get in the workplace, it's a big part of our identity too, and it's where we really derive a lot of our personal success. And so it can be really stressful when we become really interdependent with others for achieving some of that success for ourselves. And also just the amount of time that we spend there, and we want to feel good about the time that we spend there. So if when we rely on others, we really have to be able to maximize our interactions with them and make it as successful and pleasant as possible.
I know that one of my teenagers was working on a group project using Google Docs the other evening, and she was giving us a play-by-play actually, because she was trying to work with a team member, and you can edit things in real time when you're on that program. And she and a schoolmate were having an intense disagreement about how to format a document that they had to present the next day. and it just made me think that, that there would be frustrations if you're working with someone who's not pulling their weight, as this partner that she had in this project was apparently not doing, and had left everything until the last moment, and then they were scrambling till 10 o'clock at night the night before the presentation. And it makes me wonder, how do people handle that in a workplace setting?
Well, I think that communication is absolutely crucial, and setting expectations and really understanding both the culture of the work environment that you're in. That's really, really important. The culture that you live in, which is also really important. I used to teach some classes in crossing cultures with Japan. I was working with teams that had a lot of cross-cultural interaction over there, and they were getting really frustrated about how they would come to a meeting and there would be the outcomes would be different, or the style or the pace would be different, or what was accomplished in the meeting was even different. So the expectations were all off. And once they started learning about each other's cultural lens, it was fascinating, because then you could be like, oh, okay, that makes more sense now. I need to do a lot more behind the scenes communication, because that's where the decision gets made. So then I come to a meeting and I'm actually prepared, and I understand that we're not making any decisions there, because actually all the decisions were made outside of the meeting. So people can understand the rhythm of how the work gets done, because they've communicated about it, they've learned about it, they understand. And so I think even when we're working in our own cultural environment, we still have to understand each individual's unique style. So I used to do a lot of facilitation with the Myers-Briggs, for example, where people could learn about themselves and how they preferred to interact with the world, what their communication styles might be, how they organized things, how they made decisions. And then when you brought them together as a team and they learned about each other, all of a sudden things started making more sense. So, for example, when John comes in the morning and, he needs that time from 8 to 9 to get organized. So don't schedule a meeting with him at that point in time. Wait until later on in the morning, and then you'll have a much more effective meeting and communication outcome. So really learning about yourself is absolutely crucial, and how you see the world. Because then when you understand how you see the world, it gives you a lens and a language for understanding how other people see the world. And then it gives you a platform from which to communicate. And so to your daughter or your child's example, if they communicate about expectations really clearly up front, and then they can hold each other to a particular standard and they understand how each other works, then it makes it a lot more effective down the road.
Absolutely. I think she's a pretty good communicator, and she had communicated, but it didn't seem to work for her. And so I guess the time that it takes, though, to get to know colleagues isn't always made available. And I was speaking last week with my guest, who was talking about also doing Myers-Briggs with her team and doing things like the Enneagram, and there was another I can't remember what it was called, but it was another strategy book that she uses for finding out how the 5 key things that the way people behave, and she uses all of those with her team. And I was saying that takes time, and not every organization is willing to do that. So what do you tell a worker who would like to be able to take the time to get to know all of their colleagues in that way, but perhaps aren't given that opportunity in the workplace?
Then I think it's really, the more they can learn about themselves, then they bring that to every interaction. So they're aware that there might be a difference. And that's one of the things about communication that's always been fascinating to me, is that until people really start bumping up and understanding that there might be differences in just how people perceive a situation, they have trouble coming to an interaction, and they just get frustrated with someone else's behavior. Whereas if they know about themselves, then they understand, oh, I think about something this way. They might be thinking about this differently. So that gives them an opportunity to ask more questions in the moment, in the interaction itself. So the more you know about yourself and how you see the world, then you can use that and apply it everywhere. You don't necessarily have to spend a great deal of time understanding other people. It's great if you have it, but if you don't, just understanding that there are lots of different lenses that people look at the world through.
Yeah, and I don't think everyone does that. In my experience, I don't think everyone does that. I know that some people write off not being able to get along with someone else as a personality clash. Do you believe there's such a thing?
I think that there can be, people who maybe, in a sense, are predisposed not to get along because they do see the world very differently, and they remain rather inflexible. And I think that's a big part of communication, is being flexible. Part of relationships is having that flexibility and being able to adapt. So I don't think that necessarily there are people that just are not going to get along, but there are people who are going to be refusing to be flexible, or refusing to participate in a conversation, or refusing to look at what they bring to the table that will create conflict.
Right. And so that makes it very difficult, particularly for the HR people.
Yes, yes, it does. Having spent quite a bit of time in various HR roles, you do spend some time arbitrating between people and talking to people and coaching them on how to be more effective communicators. But there has to be a willingness, I think, within somebody to to be vulnerable. I know Brene Brown talks about this a lot, about vulnerability. And I think that shows up in communication in the workplace too, is people are more successful, I think, in their lives and in their communications, the more vulnerable they're willing to be. And part of that shows up in, they don't have to be right all the time. They don't have to have the answers all the time. They are willing to explore, and they're willing to say, I don't know, but let me figure out how to solve that problem, or how to answer that question. People feel like I don't know is often kind of a really negative phrase, but actually I know a lot of leaders that, if you say I don't know and you follow it with, but let's find out, I'm willing to go find out, let me research that, then that's a strength, because you're identifying something. You're not trying to go out and say, yes, I can do this, I know this. and pretend to be something that you're not, or present something that you can't do. And so I think it's that vulnerability that people can bring to the table that actually will make them more successful in the end.
I just had an interview. I'd never had an online interview before, but I had an interview for a contract position that I'll be doing, facilitating in corporate settings, some health and wellness workshops, and one of the questions was, if someone asks you a question that you don't know how to answer, how will you handle it? And I basically answered the same way. I said I would tell them I don't have the answer rather than make something up, and tell them, if I can get back to them before the end of the workshop, I will. But that, to be honest and vulnerable about not having that answer rather than inventing something that isn't accurate.
Correct. And when you're willing to say I don't know, it opens up the possibility for creative exploration, for more teamwork, for someone to say, hey, let me help you with that, or to create some partnerships and cooperation together. So it can actually be a builder when people allow it to be, versus something that's a negative.
So we spend hours and hours with our coworkers and colleagues, and sometimes that can lead to other kinds of relationships. So let's look for a minute at romantic relationships in the workplace. And I know as HR person who's worked in HR, you're probably shuddering right now.
Yeah, romantic relationships in the workplace, they happen often. I know so many people who have met their life partners in a workplace setting, and I think it's inevitable. I know, back in the old days, there were a lot of companies that actually forbade you to have romantic relationships in the workplace, and I was like, I'm not sure how they can actually do that, because they just happen. And but I think that if people behave responsibly and they act with integrity in those situations, I think it's going to happen, and I think it's okay.
Yeah, it can be tricky, and it can be, it's kind of stereotypical in some ways.
Yeah, but I think, with that, I think they have to remember that when they're at work, they bring their work self to work. They're not bringing their romantic self to work. And so that's where part of the responsibility comes in, is if you do have a workplace relationship, you have to act professionally, and you have to act with integrity, and you don't bring your personal life there in that way. You have to, almost show extra respect for your partner, extra respect for your colleagues, and leave that relationship at home and bring your best work self without that romantic partnership to work.
Right. No public displays of affection.
Right. Yeah. No making out by the coffee cooler. And people make some crazy decisions in those situations. I mean, particularly when you first fall in love, and it's a huge risk for people to do that. And, really be conscious of, particularly in this day and age of all the social media and exposure, and the fact that, there really is no private life anymore. You want to be careful about what do you post on social media about your new partnership with your colleague at work. And it also can have lasting effects, because if you break up, you still have to see that person at work unless one of you is willing to leave the company. And this is ages and ages ago, but I worked at a company where it was kind of legend that there were two heads of departments, and they were married, and one of them had an affair, and then the other one got really ugly during the divorce proceedings. And so the two departments, actually all the people underneath them, went to almost war with each other, and actually had a pretty dramatic negative effect on what the company was able to deliver for results. And one of them eventually had to leave the company, and it was a pretty big deal. So those are the kinds of situations where if you are going to have a workplace romance, you really have to be super respectful of the people that you not only are you working with, and the fact that you have their careers in your hand, but that your company is there to do a job, not to lead your romantic life.
Right, and it sounds like that kind of a situation would have far more effect than just on those two people. It sounds like it then becomes bigger than the both of them.
It does. It becomes much bigger than the both of them. And so, it's just act with integrity and act with caution and act with care. So, and if you do have a relationship where you work together and you no longer decide to be romantic, then you have to really go above and beyond and make sure that you are acting in a really, really professional way. And you don't gossip with your friends about any of the intimacies of that partnership or the ending of that partnership, but that you treat it incredibly respectfully, no matter how angry you are. And I think that's the difficult part, is people's emotions can get really intense.
So going back to relationships with colleagues and that aren't romantic, just workplace relationships, you mentioned social media being so pervasive nowadays. People have to be careful about that as well, about making sure that they're being respectful of work colleagues on social media as well, because I'm sure there could be backlashes against that.
Oh, absolutely. I actually, I know someone who I watched their feed on Facebook, and 2/3 of their feed is negative conversation about colleagues and their boss. And I've mentioned it a couple times that hey, that you might want to knock that off, and they still do it. And so eventually I really believe that that's not only disrespectful of the team that they're working on and disrespectful of their boss, because you may not agree with everything that your boss does, nor may you agree with any things that your team does, but to publicly shame people through those kinds of disagreements on a social media platform, I think is not only detrimental to your career, but it demonstrates something of your character. Mm-hmm. And eventually that will come back, either in someone wanting to hire you later on for a job. They will find a way to look at your social media, and they'll see, how you treat people. And so you really do have to be careful what you post, how you post it, how you vent your frustrations, because we all are going to get frustrated at work at various times. So how you manage those types of things, particularly in the social media platform, is crucial.
What do you see as the biggest block or the biggest issue in workplace relationships?
I think ego. It is, when you go to work, it is the foundation of how you support yourself. It's how you make money. It's what makes you economically feel safe in the world. And it also, your success or failures at work, kind of feed in some ways your confidence. They do feed your ego a little bit. And I think that can really get in the way of really effective partnership with people, is when your ego gets too involved in the relationship. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. I've seen that in action too.
It's because people often come to relationships with a mindset of lack, and rather than come to relationships with a mindset that there is enough abundance for all, that the more we team together and work together to create positive outcomes, personally and professionally, then the better off we will all be. And so I think oftentimes people will come to work and they'll act in their relationships from a really individualistic, siloed perspective. And that's when things will break down, because it becomes almost, I have this vision of a land grab. I want this job. I want to manage this team. I want this project because somehow that's going to make me better. It's going to make me more. It's going to make me more successful. I'm going to get more money from it somehow. And I think that doesn't serve I want to say the greater good, but I think, I'll kind of stick with that. I don't think it serves even the individual, because in the end they become pretty isolated with that kind of behavior.
Mm-hmm. I've heard it said that organizations would be great if it weren't for the people.
Right. Exactly. And I think if we, can come to work with that mindset that generates that there really is enough abundance for everyone, and we can partner with each other and we treat each other kindly, we'll be so much happier there, and we'll be so much more successful, and there'll be much more of an open door for creative work and for people to be their best self. And I go back to that knowing yourself, because if you know yourself really well, and you know where you can positively contribute to things, and maybe where you need to fill in maybe some skill gaps for yourself by bringing in other people that are good complements to you and build those partnerships, then you can just be so much more successful at what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm. It's more about collaboration than competition.
Correct. Yeah. And cooperation with each other. And it may not be your day to shine. It may be someone else's day to shine. And if we can celebrate those successes for other people, then we most definitely will have people in our corner to celebrate our own success.
Is it more challenging in these times when people seem to be divided, along political lines, and the division seems to be forefront right now? Does that make it more difficult in the workplace?
I think that we are in an exceptionally unusual time, particularly as it relates to politics. And there are, a lot of divides between people. And this is really where I think our need to be right and our ego needs to kind of step aside, and where it really will behoove people either to leave the politics at the door or to make a real solid effort at trying to understand other people's point of view. And if we feel like we're not open to those conversations, then we really need to leave the politics and the divisions at the door and find ways to come together where we can.
Find commonalities and things we have in common and agree on. Yeah.
Right. I mean, the politics is really one slice of our lives. And I think that if we were friends before the current time, then I think there's still a lot of opportunity to remain friends. My best friend and I couldn't be more diverse politically, and yet we are able to maintain our friendship through this time because we actually focus on the fact that we respect so many things about each other, and we love each other, and we care about each other, and that continues to bring us to the table.
So if you had a last piece of advice, what would it be for people, Sandra?
I think it's really around integrity. And all of these things that we've talked about, whether it's a relationship with a colleague that's romantic or just work bound, or whether we're working as a team, that when we can act with integrity and we act in accordance with our value system, then I think things have a much greater chance of being super successful. And we have to always remember that when we come to work, we are bringing our whole self to work. We don't just park that at the door. So we have to really be respectful of our colleagues, whether it's our bosses, our peers, people who work for us. And we have to be respectful of the people, our friends, and our partners at home. So I think really acting with integrity and understanding what your value system is and staying aligned with that is really crucial, and allowing ourselves to be vulnerable.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. Where can people connect with you and learn more about what it is you do and about your wonderful game, Relationship Reveal?
The website is relationshipreveal.com, or feel free to email me at info@relationshipreveal.com. And also you can like us on our Facebook page, which is also Relationship Reveal. So I would love to hear from people and thoughts, questions, ideas, feedback, anything.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to speak with us today. We've had a great conversation, I think, and lots to think about in the workplace relationship area.
Well, thanks for having me. I was happy to be here.
Thanks, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Sandra Fischer and that you will come to the website at communicationdiva.com to the show notes for episode 118 and check out all the links for Sandra's information, where you can find her, where you can take a look at her game. That sounds fantastic. I'm getting a copy of it shortly. And where you can leave feedback, share with the share buttons, and spread the word about Communication Diva. I appreciate your efforts. All of the content is absolutely free on the Communication Diva podcast, and in order to continue producing the content, I appreciate your help in spreading the news and sharing it far and wide. So if there's something you like, please take a moment to come over to the website and to click one of those share buttons, or to go to iTunes, the Communication Diva podcast, and leave a review on iTunes. All of that will assist in helping me to further my goal of helping more and more people around the world with this podcast. Until next time, take very good care, and especially take care of your relationships. This is Jenn Swanson. Talk to you soon.